All right. Welcome to your deep dive for today.
Yeah.
We've got a really interesting one, I think.
Yeah.
Especially for you, since I know you're really into like the history of scientific research and all that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking about Plum Island.
Oh, Plum Island. Now that's a place.
You ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah. It really captures the imagination. This little island off the coast of Long Island. And
Right.
officially it was home to the Plum Island Animal Disease Center.
Okay.
So, sounds pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
But it was run by Homeland Security.
Interesting.
And that's a little unusual for a facility that's just studying animal diseases.
It's kind of like one of those things where it's like,
Yeah.
it's almost like you find like a locked diary. You just have to know what's in it.
Exactly. You can't help but be curious.
And our source material today is definitely like jiving headfirst into that diary.
Oh, yeah.
It's a YouTube video.
Okay.
And it's called, just to give you a sense of the tone, The Horrors of Plum Island.
Oh, wow.
Hybrids, human experiments, and weaponized killer insects.
Ooh, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so we got some pretty intriguing claims that we're going to try to sort through today.
All right, sounds good.
So this video kind of starts out with a very captivating story.
Okay.
Slightly outlandish, but captivating nonetheless. It's about
I like those.
the Montauk monster.
The Montauk monster.
Have you heard of this?
I think so, vaguely.
Okay, so this was this weird creature
Okay.
that was found on a beach, like near Plum Island.
Right.
And naturally, everybody thought, oh my God, it's some escaped experiment.
Yeah, classic.
Right.
Hmm.
But, before we get totally swept up in the mystery,
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember what was really going on Plum Island, at least officially, right?
Yeah, the real world context.
They were researching some pretty serious livestock diseases,
Okay.
like foot and mouth disease,
Right.
which, if you know anything about that, that could be really devastating if that were to spread.
Oh, absolutely. These diseases are highly contagious, and I mean, they could cripple agriculture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So while like the monster thing is very, good for headlines,
Yeah.
the actual research that was happening there was pretty serious business.
It had some very real implications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of serious, the video then kind of like shifts gears
Okay.
and it gets into Plum Island's history, specifically
Okay.
its involvement in bioweapons research during the Cold War.
Oh, okay.
So it claims that the U.S. was looking into weaponizing foot and mouth disease.
Right. Which, like we just said, could be incredibly destructive.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even want to think about it.
No.
Yeah.
And, thinking about the Cold War, it was such a paranoid time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And there was this whole arms race going
Uh-huh.
on, and that included biological weapons.
Absolutely.
So I guess in that context, it's not surprising that they were looking into this kind of thing,
No, not entirely.
even though it's kind of disturbing
It is a bit unsettling.
to think about.
Yes.
And the video really kind of goes deep on this whole angle by introducing this German scientist, Eric Traub.
Eric Traub. Okay.
And supposedly he was like this expert
Uh-huh.
in weaponizing insects,
Weaponizing insects.
like specifically using ticks to spread diseases.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is where it really starts to feel like a spy thriller.
Like some real cloak and dagger stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it turns out
Mm-hmm.
he was part of this program called Operation Paperclip,
Right.
which was where the U.S. was recruiting all these German scientists after World War II.
Some of whom had worked for the Nazi regime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty controversial program. Right?
Very controversial.
Because, on the one hand, they wanted to get all this scientific knowledge.
Sure, to gain a scientific edge in the Cold War.
Yeah. But on the other hand,
Yeah.
you're potentially giving safe haven to people who might have been involved in war crimes.
Right. A real ethical dilemma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
Traub,
His work with ticks, this is the part that really gets to me.
yeah, it's pretty creepy
It's chilling.
to think about.
Yeah.
But we should probably be a little careful about drawing like a direct connection
Yeah.
between his work and, and things that are happening today.
Right. We don't want to jump to conclusions.
Because Lyme disease, which is spread by ticks, wasn't even really identified until decades later.
Right. Lyme disease, totally different time period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, you can kind of see how people might put those two things together.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's easy to connect the dots
Yeah.
when you're looking for a pattern.
And speaking of Lyme disease,
Mm-hmm.
the video definitely makes that connection,
They do.
like directly.
Okay.
They point out that the first major outbreak of Lyme disease was in Old Lyme, Connecticut,
Right.
which is pretty close to Plum Island.
It is geographically close,
Right,
but,
yeah.
Proximity doesn't equal causation.
That's true.
Right. Just because they're close to each other doesn't mean one caused the other.
Yeah.
Lyme disease, it's a tick-borne illness, and those have been around,
Yeah.
Long before Plum Island.
True.
Yeah.
And they're influenced by all sorts of environmental factors.
Absolutely. Climate, vegetation, animal populations.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's complex.
But then, just when you think, okay, maybe it's just a coincidence,
Uh-huh.
the video throws in another twist.
Oh, boy.
They claim that Willy Bergdorfer,
Willy Bergedorf. Okay.
the guy who's credited with discovering Lyme disease,
Right.
was also involved in weaponizing ticks for the U.S. military.
What? No way.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And they even mention this statement that he supposedly made later in life, suggesting that Lyme disease could have been an experiment gone wrong.
Interesting. Although without more context, it's hard to know what he really meant.
Right, but it definitely adds to the whole.
It's intriguing.
Yeah,
Right.
it is. And it kind of feeds into this broader unease that people have about government experiments.
Sure.
And the potential for things to go wrong.
Yeah, the unintended consequence.
Right. And they even bring up some other examples,
Like what?
like the Tuskegee syphilis study.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, where the government withheld treatment from black men with syphilis.
Yeah, for decades.
Terrible.
And then there's Operation Sea Spray.
I'm not familiar with that one.
So this is where they sprayed bacteria over San Francisco.
They did what?
Yeah, to study how it would spread.
Wow.
So
It's
pretty messed up. Pretty disturbing examples.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really are.
It kind of shows how, a lack of transparency can really lead to mistrust.
Oh, for sure. Especially when it comes to scientific research.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you can't trust the people who are supposed to be looking out for your best interests, then who can you trust?
Right. It's like this ultimate breach of trust.
Yeah.
Like if something like that happened before, why wouldn't it happen again? Exactly. It makes you wonder.
And that's where the video really starts to ramp up the fear factor.
Yeah, okay.
They go into all these alarming incidents at high security labs.
Like what?
Like the CDC.
Oh, wow.
To kind of suggest that Plum Island could have been just as vulnerable.
Vulnerable to what?
To accidents or leaks or things like that.
Okay.
So they highlight cases of like anthrax,
Right.
Ebola, smallpox
Right.
being mishandled. And, it's important to acknowledge that these things do happen.
Oh, absolutely. These incidents are serious.
Yeah.
We need to learn from them.
Yeah.
But we also need to understand that
Yeah.
there are stringent safety protocols in place at these facilities. Like,
Right.
these are exceptions, not the rule.
That's true, but the video's whole point is that Plum Island had this history of security issues
They did.
that make these kind of incidents seem even more plausible.
Okay, I see.
Like, for example, they mentioned this incident in 1978 where foot and mouth disease actually escaped from the island.
It did.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And it resulted in them having to call all the animals there.
Oh my gosh, that's a major setback.
It was a big deal.
And it really highlights the importance of, biosafety measures.
For sure.
And having a robust emergency response plan.
Yeah. But according to the video, the problems didn't stop there.
There were more.
They talk about this USDA report that revealed all these issues at Plum Island.
Like what kind of issues?
Leaky roofs,
Oh, no.
rusted infrastructure,
Oh, gosh.
improperly handled hazardous materials.
That's not good.
Yeah, it kind of paints this picture of a place that's struggling to keep things under control.
That's a bit concerning.
Yeah.
But, hopefully that report led to some changes.
Yeah, they say it did.
Okay.
But the video just keeps piling on these examples.
Okay, like what?
They talk about a 600-gallon container of liquid nitrogen.
Liquid nitrogen.
Yeah, falling off a ferry.
Oh, my.
Oil and chemical spills.
Oh, no.
Even a missing minivan with unknown cargo.
What? A missing minivan.
Yeah.
This is starting to sound a little wild.
I know, it's like almost too bizarre to be true.
Yeah.
But, even if they're exaggerating some of these details, it does make you think about oversight and accountability.
Sure. Transparency is crucial, especially when you're dealing with potentially hazardous materials and research.
Right, because if you're not transparent,
yeah,
it just breeds suspicion.
absolutely. People are going to assume the worst.
And it makes the whole situation seem even more shady.
Yeah, like they're hiding something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they bring up this incident in 2002
Okay.
where the workers at Plum Island went on strike.
They did. Why?
And because of the strike, they had to hire all these less experienced replacements.
Uh-oh.
And the video claims that this led to even more safety and security concerns.
Oh, no.
Like it even prompted an FBI investigation.
The FBI. Wow, that's serious.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what was really going on there.
It does.
So basically, the video is arguing that the U.S. government was repeatedly violating international agreements
Oh, wow.
regarding bioweapons research.
Okay, that's a big accusation.
Yeah, and this specifically mentioned the Geneva Protocol.
Right, which banned biological weapons.
Yeah, and the U.S. refused to sign it for decades.
They did.
Yeah,
Wow.
and even after they finally signed it in 1975, the video claims that the CIA was still maintaining stockpiles of these weapons,
Oh, my gosh.
which would be a direct violation of the treaty.
It would, yeah.
So it's like all of this just makes you wonder
Yeah.
how much of this kind of research is still going on and whether there are other Plum Islands out there
Right, places we don't know about.
we don't know about.
Yeah.
It's a pretty unsettling thought.
It is, it really is.
But on a slightly lighter note,
Okay.
the video does mention that Plum Island actually closed down in 2021.
It did.
Yeah.
What happened to the research?
They moved it to a new facility in Kansas.
Kansas. Wow, okay.
Yeah. So it seems like the story of Plum Island might be over. But all these questions that it raises
Right.
about government secrecy, the potential for accidents.
And the ethics of bioresearch.
Yeah, those are definitely far from settled.
No, they're not. And they're more relevant than ever.
Yeah, this is already giving me a lot to think about.
Me too.
It's amazing how one little island can become like this focal point
It is.
for so many complex issues.
It really is. It's like a microcosm of our anxieties about science and technology and government control.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So we've just scratched the surface here.
We have.
We still have a lot to unpack.
We do.
When it comes to the scientific realities, the media's role in all of this,
Yeah.
and the implications for biosecurity in the 21st century.
Absolutely. There's so much more to explore.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
I'm excited to dive deeper. You know, it's funny how this video uses Plum Island to kind of tap into our fears about science gone wrong. You know, like that idea of the unknown and unintended consequences.
It's like a modern Frankenstein story.
Exactly.
Like, we're so fascinated by science, but then at the same time, we're like, oh, but what if it goes too far?
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's that push and pull.
Yeah.
And this video does a really good job, I think, of weaving together real events and real science,
Right.
but then also some speculation.
Yeah, so as viewers, how do we sort through all that?
Yeah, how do we separate fact from fiction?
Mm.
I mean, that's where critical thinking is so important.
Yeah.
You know, questioning your assumptions,
Uh-huh.
evaluating the sources, looking at different perspectives.
Right.
For example, they make a lot of claims about the weaponization of insects,
Okay.
which sounds like something out of science fiction, right?
That does.
But there actually is a historical basis for it.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Like during World War II, Japan had a whole biowarfare program
Wow.
that was using fleas to spread the plague.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and then during the Cold War, both the U.S. and the Soviets were experimenting with insects as a way to spread diseases.
That's both fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
It is.
So, like, how effective was that? Like, could they actually use insects as weapons?
You know, it's debatable.
Okay.
There are a lot of challenges.
Like what?
Well, first of all, how do you control where the insects go?
Right.
How do you make sure they actually reach the target?
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, there are huge ethical concerns
Right.
about potentially causing a disease outbreak.
Right.
So, yeah, it's really complicated.
So I imagine trying to actually weaponize a disease would be pretty difficult.
Oh, incredibly difficult.
Like, where do you even start?
Well, first of all, you'd need a pathogen that's deadly,
Uh-huh.
but also stable enough to survive the delivery process.
Right.
Then you'd need a way to infect a lot of insects with it.
Okay.
Let's make sure they actually survive and reach the target.
Yeah.
And then there's always the risk of mutation
Oh, right.
or the disease spreading in ways you didn't anticipate.
It sounds like a lot could go wrong,
Oh, absolutely.
but the fact that they were even considering it is pretty scary.
It is. It speaks to the kind of paranoia of that time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, it's also why we have things like the Biological Weapons Convention now.
Right, to try to prevent that kind of thing from happening.
Exactly, to try to prohibit the development and stockpiling of bioweapons.
Okay, so if we step back from the sensationalism of the video for a second,
Okay.
what are some key takeaways about Plum Island?
Well, one big one is the importance of transparency,
Right.
especially when you're dealing with something as potentially dangerous as pathogens.
Yeah.
People have a right to know what kind of research is being conducted,
Mhm.
what safety measures are in place,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
It's like that saying, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Exactly. Being open builds trust.
Right.
Secrecy just breeds suspicion and conspiracy theories.
And that can lead to all sorts of problems.
It can.
So transparency is key.
Absolutely. Another important takeaway is the need for constant vigilance.
Okay.
These incidents at Plum Island
Yeah.
and at other labs
Uh.
show that accidents can happen.
Even with the best protocols.
Right. Even with the best intentions.
Right. And human error is always a factor.
Always.
Yeah.
You can have the best systems in the world,
Uh-huh.
but people make mistakes.
That's true.
So you need constant monitoring, you need to be improving your safety protocols,
Right.
and you need a culture of accountability.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, the video makes a big deal out of the fact that the research was moved to Kansas.
Right.
Like the danger just got relocated.
Yeah.
But it's more complicated than that.
Okay. In what way?
Well, the move was definitely controversial.
Yeah.
Some people felt like it was putting a biohazard in the heartland of America.
Right.
But supporters of the move argued that the new facility
Uh-huh.
is much more advanced,
Okay.
state of the art.
They call it the NBAF, right?
Yeah, right. The National Bio and Agro Defense Facility.
Yeah.
And they claim it incorporates lessons learned from Plum Island and other places.
So it's like a trade-off.
Yeah,
Increased risk because of the location,
potentially.
but a more secure facility.
That's the idea anyway.
But it sounds like there's still some uncertainty.
Oh, there's always uncertainty when you're dealing with infectious diseases.
Right.
But you have to weigh the risks against the potential benefits.
Yeah.
I mean, studying these diseases is how we develop vaccines.
That's true.
Treatments, prevention strategies.
Right. We need to understand them.
We do.
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope.
It is.
Trying to balance progress with the potential danger.
Exactly. And that's a balance we have to constantly be striving for.
Right. So the video ends with this call to action,
Oh, yeah.
urging people to do their own research
Okay.
and demand transparency from the government.
Yeah.
It definitely leaves you with the feeling that there's more to the story.
It does. It's an invitation to dig deeper.
Yeah, but how do we know what to trust? There's so much information out there.
That's true. You have to be discerning.
Okay, but how?
Well, you have to evaluate your sources.
Oh.
Look at their credibility, their biases.
Right.
See if their claims are backed up by evidence.
Okay.
And don't just rely on one source.
Okay.
Compare information from different places.
Yeah.
And be wary of anything that sounds too good to be true.
So basically, we have to be our own fact checkers.
In a way, yes.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It is, but it's essential in today's world.
This has been really eye-opening.
It has.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
The science, the history, the politics.
Public perception.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It is, and we're just getting started.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, there's so much more to explore.
Like what?
Well, we could talk about the psychology of conspiracy theories,
Okay.
the role of the media in shaping public opinion,
Right.
and the implications of all of this for scientific research in a globalized world.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there.
There is, but it's fascinating stuff.
This deep dive's been wild, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've gone from these mysterious creatures to Cold War conspiracies to lab accidents and even, like the whole ethics of scientific research.
Yeah, it's really amazing how Plum Island sort of brings all these things together.
Right.
Yeah, it's like this lens to look at how we feel about science,
Yeah.
Like what we hope for, what we're afraid of, how we balance, making progress with being responsible.
And it's not just about Plum Island specifically, right? It's about like these bigger questions
Yeah, absolutely.
for all kinds of scientific research.
Yeah, like how do we make sure things are transparent?
Yeah.
How do we balance national security with the public's right to know?
Right. And like, how do we make sure that science is actually being used ethically?
Yeah, those are the big questions.
Yeah.
And Plum Island really forces us to think about them.
Yeah.
And not just scientists and policymakers, but like everybody.
One thing that really struck me about the video is how it plays on this fear of the unknown.
It does, doesn't it?
Like this idea of a secret island
Uh-huh.
with these scientists doing experiments that could like unleash deadly diseases.
It's a classic trope.
It's like it just gets to you.
Yeah, it taps into our deepest anxieties.
And with Plum Island, it's not just a story, right? Like there's real history there,
Right.
real incidents.
Yeah, so those fears aren't totally unfounded.
Right, so how do we separate those legitimate concerns from all the, like, conspiracy theories?
That's where critical thinking comes in, and
Yeah.
media literacy,
Right.
being able to evaluate your sources,
Uh-huh.
see if they're credible,
Okay.
and if their claims are actually based on evidence.
Right, and not just like, somebody's opinion.
Exactly.
Speculation.
And it's important to be aware of your own biases, too.
Right, because we all have them.
We do.
Yeah.
And they can really affect how we see things.
So it's not just about, like, reading stuff. It's about actually thinking about it.
Absolutely. It's about being an informed citizen.
Yeah.
As somebody who can actually participate in these discussions.
So the video we've been talking about, it's obviously trying to, like, make a point.
It is.
Right? About government secrecy and all that.
Yeah, it's trying to raise awareness.
Do you think it's effective?
I think it's effective at starting a conversation.
Okay.
Getting people thinking about these issues.
But it does rely on a lot of sensationalism.
It does, which can be a turnoff for some people.
Right, and it's not always clear what's real and what's not.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
it's just one perspective. It's important to get other viewpoints.
Okay, you've mentioned transparency a few times. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, it means being open with the public about what you're doing,
Okay.
what the risks are,
Uh-huh.
what safety measures are in place,
Okay.
and it also means being accountable.
So, like, if something goes wrong, you're upfront about it.
Exactly. You admit mistakes.
Okay.
You learn from them.
But wouldn't that kind of openness, like, create security risks?
It's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
You have to be careful about what information you share,
Right.
but you also have to maintain public trust.
It's tough.
It is, but it's a conversation we need to be having.
As we wrap up, I'm feeling kind of, I'm in awe of science, but also a little uneasy.
I think that's a healthy attitude to have.
Yeah.
Recognizing the potential,
Mm-hmm.
but also the risks.
So what's the takeaway for our listener?
I'd say be critical.
Okay.
Question everything, get different perspectives,
Yeah.
but also stay curious.
Okay.
Keep learning about science, It's fascinating,
Yeah, it is.
but just be aware of the potential downsides.
Plum Island is a good reminder of that.
It is.
Well, we've covered a lot today,
We have.
and I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive
I have.
and, keep exploring these topics.
Absolutely. There's always more to learn.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.